I pulled into my childhood driveway that Sunday evening and immediately knew something was wrong. My entire life sat packed in cardboard boxes on the front porch like some twisted garage sale. Dad stood in the doorway, arms crossed, his face harder than granite. Behind him lurked my sister Angela with 8-year-old Tommy clinging to her side. "You need to apologize right now, Fred." Dad's voice cut through the evening air. "What you did to Angela and little Tommy is unforgivable." I stared at the boxes containing my clothes, books, and memories from 32 years of calling this place home. Angela had accused me of stealing from Tommy's college fund after I questioned her suspicious spending last week. "Apologize or leave forever," Dad continued. "Your choice." I looked at my childhood home, at my packed belongings, at the family that raised me. Then I met Dad's steely gaze and said the only word that felt right. "Okay." The Pineview Motel on Route 42 wasn't exactly what most people would call home, but it beat sleeping in my truck. I sat on the scratchy comforter staring at water stains on the ceiling, trying to process how my life had imploded in less than 24 hours. 3 weeks ago, Angela had moved back home after her divorce from Kevin. She claimed financial hardship said she needed time to get back on her feet. Tommy was adjusting to his parents' split, and Dad saw this as his chance to be the grandfather he'd always wanted to be. Angela painted herself as the struggling single mother, and Dad bought every word. But I'd noticed things. Angela drove a brand new Lexus lease despite claiming she couldn't afford an apartment. Designer handbags appeared regularly in her possession. Her Instagram showed expensive dinners at upscale restaurants and weekend trips to luxury resorts. When I casually mentioned these observations to Dad, suggesting maybe Angela wasn't as financially strained as she claimed, everything changed. Angela overheard our conversation from the kitchen doorway. Her face transformed from sweet sister to something I'd never seen before. She accused me of jealousy, claimed I resented the attention Tommy received from Dad. She said I was trying to poison Dad against her and Tommy, spreading malicious lies because I couldn't stand seeing them happy. I worked as a software developer for Henderson Tech Solutions, pulled in a solid $75,000 annually, and lived within my means. Jealousy over money made no sense, but Angela spun the narrative perfectly. She painted me as the bitter bachelor uncle who couldn't stand his sister's happiness or his nephew's innocence. Dad believed every syllable. He'd always protected Angela even when we were kids. She got away with breaking Mom's china, lying about grades, and sneaking out in high school. I was held to different standards, expected to be responsible, while Angela got endless second chances. After Mom died 5 years ago, Dad's protective instincts toward Angela intensified. Tommy represented something precious to him, a chance to be the doting grandfather Mom never lived to see him become. But now, sitting in this dingy motel room, something nagged at me. I opened my laptop and logged into my bank account to check my finances. My emergency fund, carefully built over 7 years, should have shown $12,400. The balance read $4,236. My hands trembled as I scrolled through recent transactions. 3 withdrawals jumped out: $2,800 on October 15th. $2,700 on November 2nd, and $2,600 on November 20th. Each withdrawal happened at ATMs near Dad's neighborhood. I never made those withdrawals. I hadn't used that account in months. Someone had stolen $8,100 from me, and I had a sinking feeling I knew exactly who. Monday morning found me at First National Bank before they opened, pacing the sidewalk like a caged animal. When Margaret Phillips, the branch manager, arrived, I practically ambushed her with my printed statements and a dozen questions. "Mr. Thompson, let me pull up your account history," she said, settling behind her desk with a concerned expression. "These withdrawals were definitely made with your debit card, but let me check something." Margaret typed rapidly, her brow furrowing deeper with each keystroke. "The withdrawals occurred at 3 different ATM locations, all within a 5-mile radius of Oakwood Drive. That's your father's neighborhood, isn't it?" "It is. Can you access security footage from those ATMs?" We can request footage from our partner locations. Give me 24 hours. I spent that day researching identity theft, documenting everything I could remember about recent interactions with Angela. 2 weeks ago, she'd asked to borrow my wallet when her purse was in the car, and she needed to show ID for a package delivery. I thought nothing of it then, but now that innocent moment took on sinister implications. Tuesday brought vindication and horror in equal measure. Margaret called me into her office with a grim expression and a tablet loaded with security footage. "Mr. Thompson, I need to show you something disturbing." The first video showed a woman in a red winter coat approaching an ATM on October 15th. When she turned toward the camera, Angela's face was unmistakable. She inserted a card, entered a PIN code, and withdrew $2,800. The second video from November 2nd showed her in different clothes, but the same confident demeanor. The third video from November 20th captured her most clearly, her face fully visible as she counted the cash. "She copied your debit card information somehow," Margaret explained. "This constitutes identity theft and fraud. You need to file a police report immediately." I drove straight to Dad's house, my phone buzzing with an incoming call. Harold Thompson appeared on my screen. "Dad, I need to talk to you about something serious." "Fred, I told you not to call here until you apologized to your sister." "Dad, Angela stole over $8,000 from my bank account. I have security footage proving it." Silence stretched between us before Dad's voice returned colder than before. "You're sick, Fred. Making up stories about your sister stealing money. Angela warned me you might try something desperate like this. I have bank statements, security footage, transaction records. She used my debit card information to withdraw money from ATMs near your house. You're fabricating evidence to hurt Angela because you can't stand that Tommy and she are finally happy. I won't listen to these lies." The line went dead. I sat in my truck outside Dad's house, staring at the windows where my family lived their lives without me. A neighbor, Mrs. Chen, from across the street, approached my truck with a puzzled expression. "Fred, honey, are you all right? Your sister told everyone you've been going through a rough patch, struggling with some personal problems." My blood turned to ice. "What kind of personal problems?" "She said you've been jealous of little Tommy, resentful that your father spends time with him. She's worried about your mental state, said you've been making up stories and acting erratically. Angela had been spreading poison about me throughout the neighborhood, building a narrative that painted me as unstable and jealous. Every person who might vouch for my character was being systematically turned against me." My phone buzzed with a text from Marcus, my colleague at Henderson Tech. "Dude, call me ASAP. Something weird happened at work today." I dialed Marcus immediately. "What's going on?" "Your sister came by the office this morning asking to speak with Mr. Henderson. She said she was worried about you and needed to talk to someone about your behavior." My stomach dropped into my shoes. "What did she tell him?" "Fred, she told HR you've been struggling with gambling addiction and that you confided in her about stealing money to cover debts. She said she was concerned about your access to company financial systems and thought they should know about your personal problems." The phone almost slipped from my trembling hand. Angela wasn't just stealing my money. She was destroying my reputation, my career, everything I'd built in my adult life. "Marcus, none of that is true. She's the one who stole from me." "I believe you, man, but Mr. Henderson wants to meet with you first thing Monday morning. This doesn't look good." Monday morning's meeting with Jonathan Henderson felt like walking into my own execution. My boss of 6 years sat across from me with a folder thick enough to choke a horse, his usually friendly demeanor replaced by professional concern. "Fred, we need to discuss some troubling information that came to light last week." I'd prepared for this conversation, bringing copies of bank statements, police reports, and evidence of Angela's theft. But Henderson's first words told me Angela's poison had already taken root. "Your sister seems genuinely concerned about your well-being. She provided some disturbing details about your recent behavior and financial struggles." "Mr. Henderson, everything Angela told you is fabricated. She's the one with financial problems. She stole over $8,000 from my bank account, and I have security footage proving it." Henderson leaned back, his expression skeptical. Fred, you've been a valuable employee for 6 years, but these allegations about gambling debts and theft are serious. Combined with your sister's claims about erratic behavior, we need to conduct a full investigation. She's systematically destroying my reputation because I discovered her theft. Please look at the evidence I brought. Henderson barely glanced at my documentation. We'll review everything, but until this investigation concludes, you're suspended with pay. Clean out your desk and surrender your access cards. Walking out of Henderson Tech with my belongings in a cardboard box felt like a death march. 6 years of building professional relationships, earning respect, and advancing my career evaporated because of Angela's lies. My phone buzzed with a text from Sarah, my girlfriend of 2 years. We need to talk. Can you come over tonight? Siwas. I'd been dreading this conversation. Sarah was kind, intelligent, and honest. If Angela had reached her, the relationship I cherished most was probably over. Sarah's apartment felt different when she opened the door that evening. Her usual warm smile was replaced by guarded concern, and she didn't invite me inside immediately. Fred, your sister called me yesterday. She told me some things that really worry me. I stood in her doorway feeling like a stranger. What did she tell you? She said you've been lying about your financial situation, that you have serious gambling debts and have been stealing to cover them. She's concerned about your mental health and thinks you might be having a breakdown. Sarah, you know me. Do those accusations sound like the person you've been dating for 2 years? That's what makes this so confusing. Angela seemed genuinely worried about you. She had specific details about your behavior times when you seemed agitated or secretive. Angela had been studying me, collecting information during family gatherings, twisting normal interactions into evidence of instability. Every time I checked my phone during dinner, every moment of work stress, every natural fluctuation in mood had been cataloged and weaponized. She showed me screenshots of your bank statements, Sarah continued. Large withdrawals, erratic spending patterns. Those were unauthorized withdrawals that she made using my debit card information. I filed a police report and have security footage of her committing the theft. Sarah's expression remained doubtful. Fred, I love you, but this situation is too complicated. I think we need to take a break until you sort out whatever is happening in your life. The breakup was gentle but final. Sarah hugged me goodbye, but I felt the distance she'd already created. Angela had poisoned another relationship with surgical precision. My phone rang as I sat in my truck outside Sarah's apartment. An unknown local number appeared on the screen. Fred Thompson. This is Gary Walsh, your landlord. We need to discuss your lease situation immediately. My chest tightened. What about my lease, Mr. Walsh? I received a very concerning call from someone claiming to be your sister. She said you're planning to skip town without paying rent and suggested I should require additional security deposits. Mr. Walsh, I've never missed a rent payment in 3 years of tenancy. She mentioned you're facing financial difficulties and might not be reliable going forward. I need 3 months' rent paid in advance by Friday, or you'll need to vacate the premises. 3 months' rent totaled $4,500, almost exactly what remained in my depleted bank account. Angela had calculated everything perfectly, leaving me just enough money to either secure housing or survive, until my suspension ended, but not both. I drove home to my apartment knowing it might be one of my last nights there. Inside my mailbox waited a stack of credit card statements I'd never seen before. American Express, Visa, MasterCard, all bearing my name and address but representing accounts I'd never opened. $15,000 in combined debt stared back at me from those statements. Purchases at casinos, luxury stores, expensive restaurants, all charged to accounts opened using my stolen identity. Angela had been building a paper trail of my supposed gambling addiction and reckless spending, creating evidence to support every lie she'd told about me. The statements showed a pattern of escalating purchases over the past 4 months, coinciding perfectly with Angela's return to Dad's house. She'd been planning this character assassination from the moment she moved back home, using my trust and family access to gather the information needed to destroy my life. My phone buzzed with another text from an unknown number, Stop harassing our family or we'll get a restraining order. You've caused enough damage. Dad. I hadn't contacted anyone in the family since my conversation with Dad about the bank fraud. Angela had convinced him that my attempts to expose her theft constituted harassment and threats. Sitting alone in my apartment, surrounded by evidence of Angela's systematic destruction of my life, I realized the scope of her plan. She hadn't just stolen money. She'd stolen my family, my career, my relationship, my housing security, and my reputation. Every aspect of my adult life was crumbling because of her calculated manipulation. But as I stared at those fraudulent credit card statements, something inside me hardened. Angela had made one crucial mistake. She'd been so thorough in her destruction that the pattern was unmistakable. No real gambling addict would leave such a clean paper trail. No person having a genuine breakdown would be systematically targeted across every area of their life. Angela's perfection would be her downfall. Tuesday morning found me in the law offices of Morrison and Associates, clutching a folder thick with evidence and a determination that surprised even me. Janet Morrison specialized in identity theft and family law, and her reputation for aggressive advocacy had drawn me across town despite my dwindling bank account. Mr. Thompson, this is one of the most comprehensive identity theft cases I've encountered, Morrison said, reviewing my documentation spread across her conference table. Your sister didn't just steal money. She orchestrated a complete character assassination. Morrison was in her 50s, silver-haired and sharp as a surgical blade. She'd built her practice defending victims of financial fraud and family manipulation. The pattern here suggests months of planning. These credit card applications were submitted over a 4-month period, each using slightly different personal information to avoid triggering fraud alerts. The ATM withdrawals were timed to coincide with your sister's known whereabouts. The defamation campaign targeting your employer girlfriend and landlord shows sophisticated psychological manipulation. What are my legal options? Multiple felony charges, identity theft, credit fraud, defamation of character, elder abuse, if we can prove she's manipulating your father's finances. But we need more evidence to build an airtight case. Morrison recommended hiring private investigator David Chen, a former police detective specializing in financial fraud. Within 48 hours, Chen had uncovered information that made my situation look even worse than I'd imagined. Your sister owes $47,000 in gambling debts across 3 different casinos, Chen reported during our Friday meeting. Delaware Park, Dover Downs, and Harrington Raceway all have records of her losses over the past 18 months. She's been using cash advances from credit cards to fund her gambling addiction. The pieces clicked together with devastating clarity. Angela's expensive purchases, her claims of financial hardship. Her return to Dad's house, everything made sense through the lens of gambling addiction and desperation. There's more, Chen continued. I found records showing your sister withdrew money from an account labeled Tommy's College Fund 6 times over the past year. The account started with $45,000 from her divorce settlement and now contains less than $3,000. Angela hadn't just stolen my money. She'd stolen her own son's future, gambling away his college fund while painting herself as a devoted mother, struggling to provide for him. The most disturbing discovery involves your father's medical records, Chen said, sliding another folder across the table. Your sister has been recording his conversations with doctors, apparently, to gather information about his cognitive abilities and financial decision-making capacity. My blood turned to ice. Recording his medical consultations. She's been using a digital recorder during his appointments, claiming she wants to help him remember the doctor's instructions. But these recordings include discussions about his will, his concerns about his mental acuity, and his worries about making financial decisions. Chen played a sample recording on his laptop. Dad's voice, aged and uncertain, discussing his fears about memory loss with Dr. Peterson. Angela's voice sweet and supportive, asking leading questions about Dad's cognitive abilities and decision-making capacity. She's been documenting evidence to support a potential conservatorship claim. Morrison explained when Chen finished the playback. If she can prove your father is mentally incompetent, She gains control of his finances and can reverse any actions he might take against her. The scope of Angela's manipulation reached depths I hadn't imagined. She wasn't just stealing from me or gambling away Tommy's future. She was preparing to seize control of Dad's entire estate by manufacturing evidence of his mental decline. "We have enough to file criminal charges," Morrison said. "But I recommend we gather additional evidence before alerting her to our investigation. If she knows we're building a case, she might accelerate her timeline or destroy evidence." Chen suggested installing discreet monitoring equipment to document Angela's activities. Within a week, we had recordings of her admitting to friends over the phone that she'd been managing Dad's finances and that she'd found creative ways to fund her casino trips. The recordings captured Angela laughing about how easy it had been to convince Dad that I was the problem child. She bragged about how she'd turned the entire family against me while positioning herself as the devoted daughter protecting Dad from my supposed instability. "The old man believes everything I tell him," Angela's voice said through Chen's speakers. "Fred always was too honest for his own good. He never learned how to play the game." Listening to my sister mock my honesty while describing her systematic destruction of my life filled me with a cold fury I'd never experienced. But it also gave me something more valuable than anger, unshakable evidence of her guilt. Morrison filed the initial paperwork on a Monday morning in December. Criminal charges for identity theft, credit fraud, elder abuse, and defamation of character. Civil suits for financial damages. Emotional distress and recovery of stolen funds. The legal machinery began grinding forward with inexorable momentum. "Now we wait," Morrison said after filing the charges. "Your sister will be arrested within 48 hours. Are you prepared for your family's reaction?" I thought about Dad's refusal to listen about Tommy's confusion when his mother disappeared into the legal system about the neighborhood gossip that would follow Angela's arrest. "I'm ready," I said, and for the first time in months, I meant it. Wednesday morning brought the call I'd been expecting, but still dreaded. Dad's voice on my phone carried a confusion and panic I'd never heard before. "Fred, the police arrested Angela this morning. They're saying she stole money and committed fraud. This has to be some mistake. Dad, I tried to tell you about the theft weeks ago. You wouldn't listen. But the police are treating this like some major criminal case. They had a warrant and everything. They took boxes of papers from her room and confiscated her computer." Through our conversation, I heard Tommy crying in the background. My 8-year-old nephew was watching his mother being led away in handcuffs, and my heart broke for him even as justice finally moved forward. "There's more, Dad. She's been gambling away Tommy's college fund and recording your medical appointments without permission." Silence stretched between us before Dad's voice returned smaller and more fragile than before. "Recording my appointments. What for?" "She was building evidence to have you declared mentally incompetent so she could control your finances." The sharp intake of breath told me Dad was beginning to understand the scope of Angela's deception. When Morrison and Chen arrived at his house that afternoon with boxes of evidence, the last of his denial crumbled. Judge William Carter, Dad's longtime friend from his Rotary Club days, agreed to review our evidence informally before the formal hearings began. Carter had known our family for 20 years and commanded Dad's complete respect. "Harold, you need to see this documentation," Carter said, settling into Dad's living room with our evidence folders. "What Angela has done goes far beyond sibling rivalry or family disagreement." For 3 hours, Carter walked Dad through bank statements, security footage, recorded conversations, and credit applications. Each piece of evidence hammered another nail into Dad's protective denial about his precious daughter. The moment that broke him was hearing Angela's recorded voice laughing about manipulating the old man and calling Dad's trust pathetic. 20 years of favoritism and protective instincts shattered as Dad confronted the reality of his daughter's calculated cruelty. "She called me pathetic," Dad whispered, his voice hollow with betrayal. "I gave her everything, protected her from consequences, made excuses for her behavior, and she called me pathetic." Tommy sat quietly in the corner during Carter's explanation, old enough to understand that his mother had done terrible things, but too young to process the implications fully. Dad gathered him close, and I saw the moment when my father realized he'd failed both his children by enabling Angela's destructive behavior. Fred, Haas. I owe you an apology that I can never fully express, Dad said when Carter finished his presentation. I chose to believe lies over truth, manipulation over honesty. I failed you as a father. Before I could respond, my phone rang. Sarah's name appeared on the screen, and I answered with cautious hope. Fred. I just saw the news about Angela's arrest. The charges they're describing, the evidence the police mentioned it, makes everything she told me look like complete fabrication. Sarah. I tried to tell you the truth, but I understand why you couldn't believe it. The situation was too complicated, and Angela's lies were very convincing. Can we meet for coffee? I think we have a lot to talk about. That evening, as I sat in Dad's living room for the first time in months, Angela called from the county jail. Her voice carried a desperation I'd never heard before, all pretense of innocence abandoned. Daddy, you have to help me. The lawyers are saying I could face 15 years in prison if convicted on all charges. Dad looked at the phone with an expression of profound sadness. Angela, did you steal money from Fred's bank account? I was desperate, Daddy. The casino debts were crushing me, and I thought I could pay it back before anyone noticed. Did you record my medical appointments to gather evidence about my mental state? Long silence before Angela's voice returned smaller and more afraid. I was trying to protect the family assets. I thought if something happened to your memory, we needed documentation of your condition. You were planning to have me declared incompetent so you could control my money. No, Daddy, it wasn't like that. I was just being prepared in case something happened. Dad closed his eyes, and I watched decades of delusion collapse under the weight of truth. Angela, you gambled away. Tommy's college fund stole from your brother, destroyed his reputation and relationships, and recorded private conversations with my doctor. You weren't protecting anyone. You were protecting your addiction. The conversation ended with Angela sobbing and Dad quietly hanging up. He sat in his armchair staring at the phone, looking every one of his 72 years. I enabled this, he said finally. Every time she got in trouble, I rescued her. Every consequence she should have faced, I prevented. I created the monster that destroyed our family. But our family wasn't destroyed. Damaged, yes. Changed forever, absolutely. But not destroyed. Tommy climbed onto Dad's lap and hugged him tightly. Grandpa, is Mom going to be okay? Dad's eyes met mine across the living room, and I saw something I'd rarely witnessed from him, uncertainty about how to protect someone he loved from consequences they'd earned. Tommy, your mom made some bad choices that hurt people. She's going to have to face the consequences of those choices, but that doesn't mean we stop loving her. It means we help her learn to make better decisions. As I drove back to my motel room that night, I realized Angela had made one final crucial mistake. In her desperation to avoid consequences, she'd confessed to everything during that phone call from jail. Dad had unknowingly recorded her admission on his answering machine, providing the final piece of evidence Morrison needed to guarantee conviction. Justice was coming, but so was the hard work of rebuilding what Angela's lies had destroyed. Angela's arraignment drew a packed courtroom despite the early February snow. Morrison had prepared me for the media attention that followed high-profile identity theft cases, but seeing neighbors, former colleagues, and family friends filling the gallery still surprised me. Judge Patricia Williams reviewed the charges with methodical precision. 15 counts of identity theft, 12 counts of credit, fraud, 8 counts of bank fraud, 6 counts of elder abuse, and 4 counts of defamation of character. The prosecution had built an airtight case using our evidence, and Angela's public defender looked overwhelmed by the scope of the allegations. Your Honor, my client is prepared to enter a plea of guilty to the primary charges in exchange for consideration of her cooperation with the investigation, Angela's lawyer announced. Morrison leaned toward me during the brief recess. She's trying to minimize her sentence by appearing cooperative. but the evidence is so overwhelming that her cooperation doesn't add much value to our case. When court resumed, Angela stood to address Judge Williams directly. She looked smaller than I remembered, diminished by orange jail clothing and the absence of her usual designer accessories. Your Honor, I want to apologize to my family, especially my brother Fred and my son Tommy. My gambling addiction destroyed my judgment and led me to hurt the people I should have protected. I take full responsibility for my actions. Judge Williams studied Angela for a long moment before responding. Ms. Thompson, the court appreciates your acceptance of responsibility, but the systematic nature of these crimes suggests calculation rather than impulsive addiction behavior. The evidence shows months of planning sophisticated manipulation tactics and deliberate attempts to destroy your brother's reputation and relationships. The judge sentenced Angela to 5 years in state prison with eligibility for parole after 3 years contingent on successful completion of gambling addiction treatment and full restitution to her victims. She would also lose custody of Tommy with guardianship transferring to Dad until Angela demonstrated rehabilitation. As deputies led Angela away, she turned back toward our section of the courtroom. Her eyes found mine, and for just a moment I saw the sister I'd grown up with underneath the criminal she'd become. "I'm sorry, Fred," she mouthed silently. I nodded acknowledgement but felt no satisfaction in her downfall. Justice served didn't erase the months of pain or magically restore the relationships her lies had damaged. The real work began after the courtroom drama ended. My reinstatement at Henderson Tech required months of careful reputation. Rebuilding, Jonathan Henderson personally apologized for doubting my character, and the company implemented new policies for handling unsubstantiated allegations against employees. Marcus became my strongest advocate, helping colleagues understand how sophisticated Angela's manipulation had been. Sarah and I approached our reunion cautiously, both recognizing that our relationship had been damaged by outside forces, but also by our own responses to pressure. We started with weekly coffee meetings, rebuilding trust through honest conversation about what we'd learned during our separation. "I should have believed you over someone I'd never met," Sarah said during one of our early conversations. But Angela's story seemed so detailed and specific that I questioned my own judgment about your character. She studied me for years, collecting information she could twist into evidence of problems that didn't exist. Even I started doubting myself when the accusations piled up so quickly. Our relationship emerged stronger because we'd both learned to value actions over accusations, consistency over convenience. Dad's healing proved more complex. His guilt over enabling Angela's destructive behavior consumed him, initially manifesting as overcompensation in his attempts to support Tommy and reconnect with me. "I spent 34 years making excuses for Angela while holding you to impossible standards," he said during one of our Sunday dinners that spring. "I taught her that consequences were optional while teaching you that love was conditional on perfection. Dad, we both made mistakes. I could have been more patient with your favoritism instead of pulling away from the family." "No, Fred. A parent's job is to prepare their children for the real world where actions have consequences and love requires respect. I failed Angela by protecting her from reality, and I failed you by making you feel like you had to earn what should have been freely given." Tommy's adjustment required the most delicate handling. At 9 years old, he understood that his mother had done wrong things, but struggled with the concept that someone who loved him could also hurt his family so deliberately. Dad and I worked together to provide stability, while Tommy processed his confusion and anger. We established routines, maintained consistent expectations, and created space for him to express his feelings without judgment. "Is Mom a bad person?" Tommy asked during one of our fishing trips that summer. "Your mom is a person who made very bad choices," I replied carefully. "She loves you, but her gambling addiction made her think it was okay to hurt people to get money for gambling. That's not love behavior, even when it comes from someone who loves you." "Will she always be like this?" "People can change if they work very hard and get help with their problems. Your mom is getting help in prison, learning how to make better choices. We hope she'll be different when she comes home. But we have to protect ourselves, and you, until we know for sure. 6 months into Angela's sentence, an incident occurred that tested everyone's healing progress. Tommy received a letter from Angela containing manipulative language designed to make him feel guilty about living happily with Dad and me. "She's trying to control him from prison," Morrison explained when we brought her the letter. This type of manipulation is common among individuals with narcissistic tendencies who can't accept responsibility for consequences. We worked with Tommy's therapist to help him understand that his mother's unhappiness was not his responsibility to fix. It was a difficult lesson for a 9-year-old, but essential for his emotional development. The most shocking revelation came 8 months after Angela's sentencing, when prison medical staff discovered she'd been secretly drugging Dad's coffee during her stay at his house. Blood tests revealed traces of prescription sleep medication that explained Dad's recent memory issues and confusion. "She was deliberately impairing my cognitive function to support her incompetency claims," Dad said when Dr. Peterson explained the test results. "She was poisoning me to steal my money." The additional charges of aggravated assault and elder endangerment added 2 more years to Angela's sentence. But more importantly, they provided Dad with closure about his recent health concerns. "I thought I was developing dementia," Dad confided. "The memory problems, the confusion, the difficulty making decisions, all of it terrified me. Knowing Angela caused those symptoms with drugs feels terrible, but it also feels like getting my mind back." As Angela's first parole hearing approached, our family had to decide whether to support or oppose her early release. The decision required honest conversations about forgiveness, safety, and the possibility of genuine rehabilitation. "Has she shown real change or just learned to say the right words?" Sarah asked during one of our family discussions. Morrison reviewed Angela's prison records with us. She'd completed gambling addiction treatment, attended therapy sessions, and written extensive apology letters to family members and former employers. But she'd also been caught attempting to manipulate other inmates and had received disciplinary action for trying to use contraband cell phones. "Genuine rehabilitation takes longer than 2 years," Morrison advised, particularly for someone who demonstrated such sophisticated manipulation skills. "I recommend opposing parole until she completes her full sentence." We presented a united front at the parole hearing. Dad, Tommy, Sarah, and I all testified that while we hoped for Angela's eventual redemption, her release at that time would pose ongoing risks to family stability and Tommy's emotional development. The parole board denied Angela's request, citing insufficient evidence of genuine behavioral change and the serious nature of her crimes against vulnerable family members. As we left the hearing, Tommy asked the question that had been weighing on all our minds: "Will Mom ever be able to come home and be part of our family again?" "That depends on whether she learns to be honest and put other people's needs before her own wants," I replied. "People can change, but only if they really want to. We'll know if your mom really wants to change by watching how she acts when she gets out of prison." 3 years after Angela's arrest, our family had found a new equilibrium. Dad had updated his will to reflect his genuine wishes rather than his guilt-driven favoritism. Tommy was thriving in school and had developed a strong sense of personal integrity. Sarah and I had married and bought a house 3 blocks from Dad's place. Most importantly, we'd all learned to recognize manipulation tactics and trust our own judgment about people's actions versus their words. Angela's full release was still 18 months away, but we were no longer afraid of her return. We'd built healthy boundaries, established support systems, and learned that love without accountability isn't love at all. The family Angela had tried to control through lies and manipulation had become stronger through truth and mutual respect. Her worst efforts to destroy us had ultimately taught us how to protect and value each other properly. Justice had been served, but more importantly, wisdom had been earned. 2 years later, I stood in Dad's garage teaching Tommy how to change a tire on my truck while Sarah worked in the garden with Dad. The March afternoon carried the promise of spring, and life felt settled in ways I'd never expected after Angela's arrest. Tommy was 11 now, a thoughtful kid who asked good questions and listened carefully to answers. He'd grown 3 inches in the past year and developed Dad's stubborn streak, but channeled it into determination rather than denial. "Uncle Fred, why do we need to know how to change tires when we can just call Yoe?" Tommy asked as he positioned the jack under the truck's frame. "Because sometimes the most important skill is knowing you can take care of yourself. When you depend on other people for things you could do yourself, you give them power over your situation." Tommy nodded seriously, understanding the deeper lesson even if he couldn't articulate it yet. We'd been having these conversations for 2 years, teaching him about self-reliance, integrity, and the difference between asking for help and expecting to be rescued. Sarah walked over from the garden soil under her fingernails and satisfaction on her face. She'd taken to gardening with the same methodical precision she applied to her accounting work, and Dad's vegetable garden had never looked better. "How's the tire changing lesson going?" she asked, kissing my cheek. "Tommy's getting the hang of it. Next week we'll work on checking oil and transmission fluid." Dad emerged from the house carrying a pitcher of lemonade and wearing the content expression he'd developed over the past year. His health had improved dramatically after Angela's drugging was discovered, and he'd regained the mental sharpness I remembered from my childhood. "Fred, there's something I want to discuss with you and Sarah," Dad said as we gathered around his patio table. He handed me a thick envelope containing legal documents. "I've had Attorney Morrison update my will again. I want you to understand exactly how I've structured things and why." The will divided Dad's estate equally between Tommy and me, with provisions for Tommy's education and care until he reached 25. Angela was mentioned only to explicitly exclude her from inheritance, with detailed explanation of her criminal behavior and ongoing lack of accountability. "Dad, you don't need to justify your decisions to me anymore," I said. "Yes, I do. For 34 years, I made decisions based on guilt, favoritism, and misguided protection. Now, I make decisions based on who people actually are and what they've demonstrated through their actions. You've proven your character through consistency, responsibility, and genuine care for Tommy's well-being. Angela proved her character through lies, theft, and manipulation." Sarah squeezed my hand under the table. We'd spent many evenings discussing the complexities of family loyalty versus personal protection, and she understood why Dad's acknowledgement meant so much to me. "There's something else," Dad continued. "Angela's parole hearing is scheduled for next month. The prison counselor wants to arrange a family meeting before her release to discuss reintegration possibilities." Tommy looked up from his lemonade with the serious expression he wore when processing difficult information. "Does this mean Mom might come home?" "It means your mom will be released from prison, but it doesn't mean she automatically becomes part of our family again," I explained. "Trust has to be rebuilt through actions over time." "What kind of actions?" "Honesty about what she did wrong, taking responsibility without making excuses, showing respect for the boundaries we've established to protect ourselves and you, proving she's learned to control her gambling addiction." Dad nodded approvingly. We'd developed this approach through family therapy and endless discussions about how to protect Tommy while leaving room for Angela's potential rehabilitation. "Your mom will need to demonstrate genuine change over months or years before any of us feel comfortable trusting her again," Sarah added. "And even then, trust might look different than it did before." The family meeting at the correctional facility took place on a rainy Tuesday in April. Angela looked healthier than she had during the trial, her face fuller and her demeanor calmer, but I watched carefully for signs of the manipulation tactics Morrison had warned us to expect. I want to start by acknowledging the full scope of damage I caused. Angela began addressing our small circle in the institutional meeting room. "I stole money from Fred, destroyed his reputation, endangered Dad's health, and traumatized Tommy. I took advantage of your love and trust to fund my gambling addiction." Her words sounded rehearsed, but the emotion behind them seemed genuine. Still, I reserved judgment. Angela had always been skilled at performing remorse when consequences loomed. I've been working with addiction counselors and therapists to understand why I chose manipulation and theft instead of asking for help. The gambling addiction was real, but it doesn't excuse the deliberate cruelty of my actions toward Fred or the systematic way I tried to destroy his life. Tommy listened quietly, his 11-year-old mind processing his mother's words against his memories of the chaos surrounding her arrest. "Mom, do you understand why we might not trust you right away?" Tommy asked with directness that surprised everyone. Angela's careful composure wavered slightly. "Yes, Tommy. I understand that trust has to be earned back through actions, not just words. I hurt people who loved me, and saying I'm sorry isn't enough to fix that damage. What will you do differently if you come back to our family, I'll follow whatever boundaries and rules Dad and Uncle Fred establish. I'll continue attending addiction meetings and therapy. I'll be completely honest about my finances and activities. And I'll accept that earning your trust back might take years." The counselor facilitated our discussion for 2 hours, helping us establish preliminary ground rules for Angela's potential reintegration. She could have supervised visits with Tommy, but couldn't stay overnight at Dad's house initially. She would need to maintain steady employment and submit to random drug and alcohol testing. Most importantly, any sign of manipulation or dishonesty would result in immediate termination of family contact. "These boundaries aren't punishment," the counselor explained to Angela. "They're protection for everyone, including you. They provide structure to help you maintain the positive changes you've made while rebuilding damaged relationships." Angela's release 3 weeks later felt anticlimactic after years of legal drama and family upheaval. She moved into a halfway house across town and began working as a cashier at a grocery store, her college education and previous career lost to her criminal record. Her first supervised visit with Tommy happened at Dad's house on a Sunday afternoon with Sarah and me, present to observe and intervene if necessary. Angela seemed genuinely interested in Tommy's school activities and hobbies, asking thoughtful questions and listening to his answers without trying to manipulate his responses. "How's 5th grade going?" Angela asked as they sat together on the front porch. "Good. Uncle Fred's been helping me with math, and Grandpa taught me how to use power tools safely. We built a birdhouse last month." Angela's expression flickered with something that might have been jealousy or regret, but she recovered quickly. "That sounds wonderful. I'd love to see the birdhouse if you want to show me." Tommy led her to the backyard, chattering about his woodworking projects and plans for a vegetable garden plot Dad had promised him. I followed at a distance, watching for signs that Angela might try to undermine Tommy's relationships with Dad and me. Instead, I heard her praising Tommy's accomplishments and expressing genuine interest in his activities. When Tommy mentioned feeling proud of learning new skills, Angela responded appropriately instead of trying to redirect his attention to herself. "It sounds like Uncle Fred and Grandpa are teaching you important things," Angela said. "I'm glad you're learning so much." The visit lasted 2 hours and ended without incident. Tommy hugged his mother goodbye but didn't ask when she could visit again, suggesting he was processing the interaction cautiously. "How do you feel about seeing Mom?" Sarah asked Tommy after Angela left. "It was nice, but different. She seemed more like a regular person instead of someone trying to convince me of things." Over the following months, Angela's visits became weekly occurrences. She never missed appointments, always arrived on time, and gradually demonstrated the consistency she'd never shown before prison. She attended AA meetings, religiously maintained her job despite the challenges of working retail with a criminal record, and submitted to drug testing without complaint. More importantly, she began acknowledging specific instances of her past manipulation instead of offering general apologies. During one visit, she addressed her theft from my bank account directly. "Fred, I want you to know that I remember the exact moment I decided to copy your debit card information. You were helping Tommy with homework, and I saw your wallet on the kitchen counter. I told myself I was just borrowing money I'd pay back, but I knew I was stealing from someone who'd never done anything but support our family." These detailed acknowledgments convinced me more than any general apology could have. Angela was remembering and taking responsibility for specific acts of betrayal rather than hiding behind addiction as an excuse for everything. 6 months after her release, Angela asked to speak with me privately. We met at a coffee shop downtown Neutral Territory where I felt comfortable having a difficult conversation. "Fred, I know I can never fully repair the damage I did to your life, but I want you to understand something that might help you make sense of why I targeted you specifically." I waited for her explanation, prepared for more manipulation, but hoping for genuine insight. "You were always everything I wasn't. Honest, responsible, consistent, trustworthy. Dad held you up as an example my entire life, and instead of trying to be better, I decided to tear you down. When my gambling debts got out of control, destroying your reputation felt like solving two problems at once." Her honesty was brutal and painful, but it rang true in ways her previous apologies hadn't. "I convinced myself you had it too easy, that you deserved to struggle like I was struggling. But the truth is, you earned everything you had through hard work and good choices, while I was destroying everything I touched through selfishness and lies." "Angela, I appreciate your honesty about your motivations, but understanding why you did something doesn't automatically rebuild trust. I know, I'm not asking for forgiveness or immediate trust. I'm trying to be the person I should have been all along, even if it's too late to undo the damage." By Tommy's 12th birthday, Angela had maintained consistency for almost a year. She'd been promoted to assistant manager at the grocery store, completed her addiction treatment program, and never violated any of the boundaries we'd established. Tommy asked if his mother could attend his birthday party, and after family discussion, we agreed. Angela brought a thoughtful gift she'd obviously selected, carefully participated in activities without trying to control them, and left when the party ended, without attempting to extend her time. "Thank you for including me," she told Dad as she prepared to leave. "I know I don't deserve to be part of Tommy's celebrations, but I'm grateful you're giving me the chance to earn that privilege back." That night, as Sarah and I cleaned up birthday decorations, we discussed whether Angela's changes seemed genuine or temporary. "She's been consistent for 11 months, Sarah observed. "That's longer than most manipulative people can maintain a facade. I think she's genuinely trying to change, but I'm not ready to trust her completely. Tommy's well-being is more important than Angela's rehabilitation." "What would it take for you to consider trusting her again?" I thought about the question seriously. Years of continued consistency. Evidence that she's developed genuine empathy instead of just learning to say the right words. Proof that she can handle stress and disappointment without reverting to manipulation. 2 years after Angela's release, those conditions were gradually being met. She'd weathered several stressful situations without lying or trying to manipulate outcomes. When her roommate at the halfway house relapsed and created drama, Angela moved to her own apartment instead of getting drawn into the chaos. When her work schedule prevented her from attending one of Tommy's school events, she called to apologize instead of making excuses or trying to guilt anyone into accommodating her. Most convincingly, Angela began putting Tommy's needs ahead of her own desires. When Tommy expressed interest in joining the Boy Scouts, Angela researched local troops and encouraged his participation, even though meetings conflicted with her visit schedule. "I want Tommy to have every opportunity to develop good relationships and learn important skills," Angela told Dad when she requested schedule changes to accommodate scouts. "My visiting time is less important than his activities." This represented a fundamental shift from Angela's previous behavior. The old Angela would have sabotaged activities that competed for Tommy's attention, or tried to convince him that other people were more important to him than she was. On the 3rd anniversary of Angela's arrest, our family gathered for Sunday dinner, as had become our weekly tradition. Angela was included, now a regular presence, but not yet a fully trusted family member. Tommy, now 13 and developing his own opinions about family dynamics, made an observation that surprised everyone. "I think Mom is different now, but I don't want things to go back exactly like they were before." "What do you mean?" Dad asked. "Before, Mom was the center of everything and everyone had to adjust their plans around her problems. Now we're all happier because we make plans based on what's good for everyone, not just what makes Mom feel better." Angela listened to Tommy's assessment without defensiveness, nodding thoughtfully as he continued. "I love Mom, but I like how our family works now. Everyone is honest and nobody has to pretend things are okay when they're not." "Tommy, how do you think we should handle Mom being part of our family going forward?" I asked. I think she should keep proving she's changed, and we should keep being careful about trusting her completely. But I also think we should give her chances to be part of good things when she shows she can handle them. Tommy's wisdom impressed all of us. At 13, he understood healthy relationship dynamics better than most adults. Angela wiped away tears as she responded to her son's assessment. Tommy, you've grown into an amazing young man despite my mistakes. I'm proud of who you're becoming, and I promise to keep earning the right to be part of your life. As I looked around Dad's dinner table that evening, I realized our family had become something entirely different from what it was before Angela's crimes. We'd lost naivety and unconditional trust, but gained wisdom and genuine respect for each other. Dad was no longer the enabler who protected Angela from consequences, but a grandfather who taught Tommy about integrity through example. Tommy was developing strength and discernment instead of the people-pleasing tendencies that might have emerged from a chaotic childhood. Sarah had become an integral part of our family, bringing stability and outside perspective to our healing process. And Angela, whether permanently or temporarily, had learned to contribute to family well-being instead of demanding that everyone sacrifice their well-being for her benefit. Most surprisingly, I'd discovered that walking away with dignity intact had been the right choice that terrible Sunday when Dad packed my belongings. My simple okay hadn't been surrender, it had been the first step toward forcing Angela to face consequences she'd avoided her entire life. Sometimes the greatest strength is walking away with dignity intact. When people show you who they really are, believe them the first time. But true family isn't about blood, it's about who stands by you when the world falls apart and who celebrates with you when you rise again. Forgiveness doesn't mean forgetting, and setting boundaries isn't cruel, it's necessary for everyone's healing. Love without accountability isn't love at all, it's enablement that hurts everyone involved. Angela's attempt to destroy my life had ultimately taught our entire family how to build healthier relationships based on respect rather than manipulation. Her worst efforts to control us had freed us to love each other authentically. The account she'd stolen from hadn't just contained my money, it had represented years of responsible choices and careful planning. But what she couldn't steal was the character that enabled me to rebuild everything she'd destroyed. As I watched Tommy help Dad clear the dinner dishes while discussing their plans for building a deck, that summer I realized our family's future was brighter than its past had ever been. Sometimes the ending we don't choose becomes the beginning we needed. What would you have done if you discovered a family member was systematically destroying your life while playing the victim? Have you ever had to choose between keeping peace and demanding truth? Share your thoughts in the comments below. If this story resonated with you, please like this video and subscribe for more real-life stories about overcoming family betrayal and finding strength through adversity. Share this with someone who might need to hear that standing up for yourself isn't cruel, it's necessary. Thank you for listening to my story, and remember that sometimes the courage to walk away leads to the wisdom to build something better.